A woman by the name of Faye awaits the arrival of an old fling from her past. She's out camping, uncertain whether he'll come or not. The scenery is beautiful, mountains, plants, and nature. We see Faye getting her fishing trap out of the water. She takes out one crab at a time and brings them back to the trailer to cook them. A country love song plays on the radio, and Faye opens a cold can of beer and sits down to feast. She enjoys her crab as the sun sets. Faye spends her evenings walking along the water on the campsite and throwing firecrackers in the water. The next morning comes, and Faye goes through her routine. She wakes up and prepares her crab. While that's cooking, she makes her morning coffee. Faye is in the middle of nowhere. She has no internet or a phone, so she doesn't know what date it is. She sits down and picks a month from a calendar. With closed eyes, Faye chooses the 17th of September as that day's date. Lunchtime comes and same as every day. Faye enjoys her crab while watching the sunset. The next morning, Faye is surprised to see someone pull up to where she's camping. She is clearly expecting someone. She adjusts her hair and makes sure she looks good, but the car reverses and heads back. Disappointment can be seen on her face, but she takes a deep breath and calms down. She fixes her fishing trap and puts sardines in as bait, so she can catch some crab. 2 books sit on her small shelf. One is a guidebook for the night sky, which talks about the stars and their names, and the other one is a book about North American birds. She is hesitant at first, but chooses the book about birds. Once she starts reading, she hears a knock on the door. She gets up quickly and adjusts her hair. She prepares herself mentally and opens the door. 4 men and a small girl adorned in cowboy hats stand in front of her trailer. Faye is surprised to see them. Clearly, they're not who she's expecting. The little girl comes to Faye. She asks her if she could move her trailer so they could dig under it. Faye tells her that she's camping there, and the girl goes back to the group of men, where they have a small discussion. The girl comes back and asks Faye if she could move to another campsite. They want to dig up their late father and move him, because the view isn't nice there anymore. Faye understands, but she tells the little girl that someone's expecting to find her at Campsite 7, where she's currently staying. The little girl knows that she can't do anything, so she gathers her brothers, and all of them leave in their truck. Nighttime comes, and Faye walks out of the trailer with the book about stars in her hand. She flashes the light into the book and reads about the different stars in the sky and their positions. Andromeda is the first star she searches for, which is above her trailer. Standing in the middle of a field, she finds the Coma Berenices. Cassiopeia the Queen is the star that makes her get into the water in the middle of the night, with her clothes on. She admires the sky as the sound of wolves echoes through the mountains. Faye wakes up the next morning and cuddles the pillow next to her, as she says good morning, Dove, to it. She gets saddened at the sight but proceeds with her routine. Her morning's different, as the mailman comes and greets her. He checks through his mail but finds none for Campsite 7. Faye is bummed but keeps her hopes up for the next day. She offers him coffee, and he drinks it instantly. Avoiding the awkward conversation, the young man thanks her for the coffee and heads on his way. Faye wants to go bird watching, so she does. But after some time, she notices that her binoculars are broken. As she fixes them in her trailer, there's a knock on the door. Faye fixes her hair and makes sure she looks good. Before she opens the door, 2 women stand in front of her, and that surprises Faye. One of them comes forward and hands Faye a letter, and the other one asks her to open it. A dinner invitation sits in the envelope, and the girls tell her that they're camping on Campsite 2. Faye is hesitant at first but agrees to go, and even asks what she could bring. Dinner time comes, and the girls are having fun outside the trailer. One of the girls tells Faye that her partner had brought her there to propose, but didn't dare do it. They tell her that one of them was supposed to propose in South Dakota, but she was scared to do it, so they continued their trip. 4.5 weeks of traveling to Nebraska, Montana, Wyoming, and still no proposal. The girl picks up the plates and heads inside, so Faye and the girl that was supposed to propose are left alone. The girl asks Faye what she should do, but Faye tells her that she doesn't know. She asks Faye whether she's camping to get away from things, and Faye tells her that she's expecting someone to visit her at the campsite. They ask her who the special man is, and Faye tells them that she doesn't know him well. She says that she had known him as a kid, but it has been decades, so she isn't that confident in what he's like. They ask her when he's coming, and Faye says she doesn't know. She admits that she doesn't even know what he looks like now. He had told her that he has a small silver car and a big black dog, and she had told him to meet her at Campsite 7. They toast to love and enjoy the hot summer night. The next morning isn't great for Faye. She gets woken up by the birds screeching, and is surprised to see her fishing trap empty, so she just has coffee for breakfast. She stares into the road and realizes that no one is going to come. She grabs the only crab she has for lunch, and that's when she decides that she has had enough. Everything gets tossed onto the back of the truck. She's ready to leave the campsite. She starts the car and heads her way, but she stops once she sees the little girl in front of her car. Faye tells her that they can have the campsite, but the girl tells her that they need help with their truck. Faye checks the car and tells them that the car needs a new engine. She goes into her trailer and sees the calendar. She realizes what she has to do and heads out again. She tells them that they can borrow the engine from her car, and she helps them replace it. The little girl turns on the car, and it works just fine. She talks to her brothers, and they all agree to give Faye their canoe for recreation and romantic excursions. They set down the canoe by her campsite and leave. Faye enjoys her dinner in the canoe and ends up falling asleep in it. The next morning, she is woken up by a dog licking her face. She gets up and sees a man knocking on the trailer's door. He's fixing his hair, waiting for her to open the door. She surprises him by saying howdy behind him. He turns around, and she is delighted to see him. She asks him whether he knows her, and he admits that he isn't sure. He asks her if she knows him, and she says the same. The big black dog comes to Faye, and she kneels to pet him. The man tells her that the dog's name is Huck, and Faye says that the dog reminds her of a dog she had. The man, whose name is Leto, pulls out a bouquet of golden aster flowers, and she thanks him. As Faye looks at the mountain peak, she tells Leto that her father used to spend his summer with the sheep there, and when the weather would get cold, the sheep would head to Utah. Her father had been one of the last Basque shepherds. Faye mentions the time when they would drive the sheep down the main street, and Leto says he remembers it all. They take a walk around nature and play with the dog. They stop at the water, and Faye reminds Leto that they had stopped there for a field trip in 1970, but it had rained a lot. Leto remembers one of their classmates, Betty Bauman, bringing a toad in her backpack to the trip. Faye laughs, she remembers it being a fun time. Leto stops for a moment. He tells Faye that she had tried to kiss him on that trip, but she refutes his statement, saying that he was the one who tried to do that. He says he doesn't remember that, but does remember catching crawdads with bacon on a string. Faye smiles as she remembers the same moment. After some time, Faye and Leto sit on a bench and enjoy the crab Faye has caught. They talk about winning the tug of war in 10th grade, and about the different celebrations on the 4th of July. After lunch, they take the canoe and have a romantic excursion. Leto tries to play the guitar like when they were kids, but he doesn't remember it, unfortunately. He is bummed, but admits that his late wife Shirley had been the real musician. He thinks that she had felt the music on a level he never could. After playing the guitar, they sit by the shore. Faye tells Leto that her late husband Tommy had been in a band. Tommy used to play on Sundays, and their tracks were called church tunes for doomed souls. Leto calls her late husband a good man, and she agrees. She lets him play with a firecracker in the water before they enjoy a good swim in it. They sit on a rock to dry off, and Leto asks her if the cabins they used to go to as kids are there, and she answers his question with another one. She asks him if he thinks that they still graze sheep in the same area, and he doesn't say anything. He laughs, and she asks him what's funny. He says that he's just remembering the times they spent there. Faye asks him whether he can love something that isn't there, and he says that he knows that he can, but she admits that she can't tell. He looks at her and asks to take a photo of her. She doesn't want to, because no one has taken her picture in 7 years. She wants people to remember her as young and pretty. But Leto tells her that she still is. Faye smiles and finally agrees. She asks him what to do, and he tells her to look at the water and slowly look at him. She is very anxious but does as she's told. When the picture is taken, she refuses to see it. Leto smiles and asks her if she plays music, but she tells him she doesn't do that anymore. They sit by the car with guitars in their hands, and Leto tells her how to begin. They start with a G note and move to a C note, back to the G, and up to the D note. Soon enough, Faye gets the gist of it, and they start playing a beautiful love song about kindness and love. The song finishes, and they laugh as they reminisce about the time when they would play for hours and hours. The mailman comes, and Faye is surprised to see him. He hands her an envelope, and she smiles when she reads it. Leto asks about the letter, and she tells him that it's from him, telling her that he will be coming. The sun starts falling down, and daylight can no longer be seen. Leto is trying to make his tent, and Faye is offering some help. He admits that he hasn't set up a tent in a while, so Faye helps him finish it in no time. She tells him to put the tent leeward side of the trailer to keep it out of the wind. They take the tent behind the trailer, and Leto mentions his late wife once again, saying that she had been the camper in the marriage. Leto settles, and Faye asks him to come inside her trailer. He gets there, and she offers him a beer at the table. They sip their beer, and Faye tells him to turn on the radio. It plays the perfect song every time. Another country love song echoes through the room, and Faye remembers she has ice cream in the freezer. She gets some cones and ice cream, and Leto helps her put them together. The tub of ice cream sits on the table, and Faye tries to scoop some of it with a knife. She admits that she has been doing it for 7 years, but she still finds it difficult, calling it a job for 2. They cheer their cones and dig in. Faye says that her grandma used to eat an ice cream cone while watching a cowboy movie every night, and the most interesting thing is that she lived until she was 101 years old. Leto smiles as he remembers that her grandmother used to call him Little Leto. After finishing the ice cream, Leto asks Faye what she does in her life. She tells him that she has 1 book for the day and 1 for the night. Leto confesses that when he found out Faye's husband Tommy passed away, he wanted to call, but he didn't know whether it was appropriate because it had been so long. He admits he has hated the place for so many years, but receiving a letter 7 years later from Faye has made him question that. He asks Faye why she sent the letter, and she says that the first 2 years after her husband passed away were the hardest for her. She admits to being too lonely to speak, and because of that, she had lost most of her teeth. After meeting her husband, Faye's life had become so much simpler because she didn't know love before. She admits that she had finally realized what the love songs were about, but when he passed away, she had forgotten all of it so easily. Faye likes to think that she has found a way to live without him, revealing that her camping out is her first trip without him. Leto smiles and asks her if she remembers them being good friends all of those years ago, and she says she does as she caresses his hand. He asks her if she misses her late husband, and Faye says that she does. She asks him the same question about his late wife, and he tells her that he does. They bump their heads together and cuddle. She caresses his cheek, and they kiss. Morning comes, and Leto and Faye are sleeping in her bed together. He wakes up first and gets out of the trailer. While outside, he spots dwarf rabbit bush flowers. He remembers that they are Faye's favorite, so he makes a bouquet for her out of them. He stands in front of the trailer door with the bouquet in his hands, but he can't make up his mind whether to get in or not. He gives up and heads to his car. He lays the bouquet on his car, taking some time to think about everything. His dog comes up to him and starts whining. Leto understands his whining, telling him that he knows. Faye wakes up and expects to cuddle up to Leto, but doesn't see him in bed. She gets out of the trailer and looks around, but he is nowhere to be seen. He comes to Faye and tells her that he has fixed her trap for her by putting more bait in it. Faye thanks him, and he thanks her for the previous night. He looks at her and has a difficult time telling her that he can't be with her. When he finally tells her that he can't be with her, she smiles. All she says is oh. She helps him take the tent down, and he tries to have a small conversation with her, but she keeps quiet. Everything is packed in the car, and Leto is ready to head on. He sees the bouquet on top of his car and decides to leave it on Faye's table, in front of the trailer. She looks at the bouquet and says that those flowers had always been her favorite, and he says that he remembers that about her. "We're going to be fine," are the last words Leto tells Faye before he disappears with his car. Faye is heartbroken. She sits in the same position until it gets dark. She finally gets up and looks at the ground, kneeling down and caressing it. She takes the bouquet from Leto and lays it on the same spot. She says her final goodbye to the man beneath her trailer. The songs from the radio are the only thing comforting Faye in her sorrow. Tears fill her eyes as she stares at the wall in front of her, realizing that there's nothing she can do. The kind words from the song feel like a hug to her, and she finally lets her tears fall. The next morning comes, and Faye wakes up without saying good morning to the imaginary person in her bed. She hears sheep in the distance and decides to follow the sound. She climbs up a hill and sees a flock with a shepherd. It reminds her of her father, so she decides to climb the mountain, to the spot where he would guide a flock. After passing through fields, woods, and hills, she finally reaches the peak of the mountain. A beautiful sunset shines in front of her, so she decides to take it all in, sitting down. She ends up falling asleep. Thinking it is morning when she wakes up, she's surprised to see the night sky. She's lucky to have fallen asleep on the peak, because she can see all of the stars she saw in her book. Coma Berenices is the first star she recognizes, Cassiopeia the Queen is the second one, and Andromeda is the third one. After enjoying the beauty of the night sky, Faye heads back to her trailer, even though it is pitch black. She arrives back at the campsite in the morning, heading to the girl's trailer. She spots the girl, who was supposed to propose, making coffee, and heads to her. The girl tells her good morning, asking if she wants a cup of coffee, but Faye tells her to do it. Faye tells her that she should propose. No matter how long they have been together, it is long enough. When Faye arrives back at her trailer, she sees the siblings with shovels in their hands. She asks them if it's time for them to dig, and they nod. She asks them if he was a good man, and they nod again. Faye goes to her car. She tells them that she will need her engine back, so they put it back in her car. After putting it back, the little girl asks Faye if they should be putting the canoe in her truck, and she tells them to give it to the girls in campsite too. Faye gives the little girl her fishing trap, before getting into her car and driving off. Now in the car, she sees the mailman on the road, and he raises his hand for her to stop. She stops in front of him, and he tells her that she has some mail. He hands her a letter, and she opens it immediately. Inside the letter is a printed picture of Faye, the one that Leto took when they were sitting in the sun. A smile forms on Faye's lips. She sets the picture down and rides into the sunset.